Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all, and welcome to FEMYSO's very first Eid reception virtually, in collaboration with our partners ARDI, the European Parliament's Anti-Racism and Diversity Intergroup. My name is Hiba Latreche. I serve as the Vice President of FEMYSO, and I will be your host tonight. There are two Eids in the year, and this first one is called Eid al-Fitr, which comes every year after the lunar month of Ramadan, in which Muslims are fasting from dawn to sunset. However, the main idea of the month is not only to stay away from food, but rather to appreciate the other virtues learned from it, such as love, peace, kindness, sharing, generosity, and patience, and other such traits, which we aim to use as guidelines until the next Ramadan comes along. Community is a very big part of this beautiful month. However, this year, due to COVID-19, plans have had to slightly change, making it a unique experience for all. For those of you that are new to FEMYSO, let me tell you what it is. FEMYSO is the Forum of European Muslim youth and student organizations, and is recognized as the voice of Muslim youth in Europe, and is regularly consulted on issues pertaining to Muslim youth by institutions, civil society, but most importantly, by our 32 member organizations in 20 European countries. Our aim is to advocate on behalf of and support the development of European Muslim youth, and FEMYSO has carried this task out faithfully since our inception in 1996. Our aim is to be an exemplary European institution, bringing together Muslim youth to network and exchange ideas, developing them through trainings and expert support to achieve their full potentials, and working closely with our memberships as well as other partners to build a better Europe for all, both locally and on a pan-European level. FEMYSO strives to be the leading voice for European Muslim youth, developing and empowering them, and working to build a diverse, cohesive, and vibrant Europe. We are organizing today's event in a similar spirit to allow our partners and institutional stakeholders to share their messages of solidarity and celebrate this vibrant occasion together with us. This event is quite special for us, as you join us during the year of our 25th anniversary. So Eid Mubarak to all. To open up this virtual Eid reception, we will start off by calling on the screen Burak Barut, FEMYSO Executive Committee member, who will be reciting a few verses from the Holy Quran, followed by a translation. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد صدق الله العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and the day are signs for those of understanding, who remember Allah while standing or sitting or lying on their sides and give thought to the creation of the heavens and the earth, saying, Our Lord, you did not create this aimlessly. Exalted are you, then protect us from the punishment of the fire. Our Lord, indeed, whoever you admit to the fire, you have disgraced him, and for the wrongdoers there are no helpers. Our Lord, indeed, we have heard a caller calling to faith, saying, Believe in your Lord, and we have believed. Our Lord, so forgive us our sins and remove from us our misdeeds, and cause us to die with the righteous. Our Lord, and grant us what you promised us through your messengers, and do not disgrace us on the day of resurrection. Indeed, you do not fail in your promise.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Burak, for this beautiful recitation. The first speaker I would like to introduce is Daniel Holtkin. We are very honored to host him tonight. Daniel Holtkin has served as Director of Communications and spokesperson for the Secretary General at the Council of Europe since 2010. He also serves as Special Representative on anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim hatred and hate crimes. He previously worked as national expert at the European Commission's Enlargement Directorate, as well as in several positions in the German government, including spokesperson for the Interior Ministry. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. In fact, it's my honor to join you, and I thank you for your interest. Of course, for me, this is a really useful exchange, and I'll tell you about some of the exchanges I've already had recently with Muslim organizations, and you can tell me whether this this reflects your impressions as well. So we're of course very concerned with the rise of hatred and hate speech, especially online, and I believe this is beginning to have a profound effect on our societies, a very negative effect. People are being discriminated because of the way they look, because of their origin, their religion, and their orientation. And the internet is spreading this exponentially. So the result is that the victims of this kind of hatred have very few ways to defend themselves. And what makes hate speech even more dangerous is that actually it often incites to violence. It includes death threats, which really can then result into deadly attacks. And the one that was most recent in this context was the attack in Halle, where 9 people were killed, mainly of migrant and Muslim origin. So it's clear that hate speech online is a growing concern to Jews and Muslims and other minorities alike. What I've learned is that for the older generation, of course, discrimination on the streets is still very much a preoccupation. They're afraid of that. But for the younger generation, who really lives with the internet, where the internet is a reality, a part of life, the threats and the kind of words that are being used online are a growing, if not the predominant threat, because the younger people realize what an effect it can have. So to a certain extent, anti-Semitic and Muslim hatred are two sides of the same coin. This is something that I very much tried to emphasize at the beginning of my mandate, because as I believe it's one of the few, or perhaps the only organization which has put those two affected groups into one mandate. Usually what has been the case is that there are anti-Semitism representatives, but we thought we would approach both communities, in particular because, as the Council of Europe was, founded after the Holocaust, and there were many victims and many types of victims, and so over the years, we have come to say that we are here also to protect Jews and Jewish life. But in the meantime, I think all responsible policymakers, and the emphasis is on responsible, openly say, like also a past German president, that Islam belongs to Europe, and therefore it is unacceptable to hear slurs and hate speech such as Muslims go home. That is absolutely unacceptable. One thing that I've heard also is that the fact that online much of the hate speech can be posted anonymously has led to appalling kind of speech, more than was the case several years ago, and obviously lead to violence. But there's the other side, which your organizations have been reporting to me, that actually a growing part of the haters, the perpetrators, is not anonymous. They're not afraid to say the things which are really unacceptable. And this is dangerous because then it migrates into mainstream media, who take then some of these conspiracy theories. So this is something we need to act upon. And when I say we, I'm thinking of the governments of Europe, in particular those governments that have large Muslim communities. So I think it's a right for the European Union, for example, with the Digital Service Act, to come forward with legislation. I think it's right for countries to come forward with legislation. And I must say, I always hear that one has to be careful with this approach because it could endanger freedom of expression. Now, I think a death threat has nothing to do with freedom of expression. And as Chancellor Merkel once said, freedom of expression is perhaps one of our most important fundamental rights. Absolutely no doubt about it. But when freedom of expression ends and hate speech and hatred, incitement to violence begins, that is certainly not covered by freedom of expression. It's not covered by freedom of expression under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, because incitement to violence is not freedom of expression. It's a crime. But unfortunately, this crime is spreading on the internet. And so what the Council of Europe has planned towards the end of the year is a comprehensive recommendation to all of our 47 member states how to combat hate speech and hate speech online. In a way, this will complement what the European Union is doing. And it will be based very much on also the jurisprudence of our court, the Human Rights Court in Strasbourg. And the second project which we have is our anti-discrimination body, ECRI, Anti-Racism and Anti-Discrimination Body, will at the end of the year, perhaps next year, beginning of the next year, produce a recommendation specifically on anti-Muslim hatred, realizing, I hope, the growing threat. I'm very much involved in this. I very much support these measures. And of course, I'm interested to hear from you, to stay in dialogue with you, because you represent a growing community and one that is effective. At the end of the day, affected. And at the end of the day, it's all about respect for each other and respect for diversity. And this is where we come in again as a fundamental European organization. Respecting each other's diversity and protecting minorities is what Europe is all about. And I'm talking about the larger Europe. It is actually one of our main added values of existing. So what I'm now doing on and helping to prepare with combating anti-Muslim hatred is back to the roots, really. It's back to the roots of the origins of this organization. And so I'm very grateful that I could make these comments. It's quite funny. I didn't know that I was actually going to be able to take part. So I recorded a little video, but it's better to be with you live. So thank you very much, and stay with us, bear with us. Let's stay in touch. And actually also thank you for FEMYSO for having filled in the questionnaire that I sent out to you regarding specifically online hatred. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan, for sharing those important messages and for the work that you do Europe-wide to create a better society for all, as well as for your constant support and being such a valuable partner. Thank you, Dan. So the next speaker that we would like to introduce today is Momodou Jallow. It is truly great to have Malcolm with us today. Malcolm, if you can please take the floor. If I may introduce you a little bit first. So Malcolm Momodou Jallow, is a member of the Swedish Parliament and the General Rapporteur on combating racism and intolerance for the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. He barely needs any introduction as a result of his incredible work to support anti-racism work globally, but particularly within Europe. Malcolm, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hiba, for this opportunity to talk to your members, talk to your network. Let me first of all just greet you, assalamu alaikum, to all the people that are listening, my fellow Muslims. And also, because this is an event somehow marking the Eid, let me also take this opportunity to say Eid Mubarak to all of you. And I hope you, you had a blessed Ramadan, month of Ramadan, in spite of all the challenges that we see going on around us and around the world. As you mentioned, I am a member of the Swedish Parliament, and I am a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, part of the Swedish delegation there. And I have had the privilege of being the General Rapporteur for combating racism and intolerance. And that means that I have the role in making sure that I, being the watchdog when it comes to racism and intolerance within the member states, and making sure that, whenever I see the evil deeds of what racism can do within our member states, I will be making a statement. I'll be condemning it. I'll be making sure that I also within my mandate try to do everything that I can to make sure that the racism that we see continue growing more visible, but also to push for recommendations as to how to address some of the difficulties and challenges as a result of the racism that we're facing in Europe to the member states. But this event today, what I would like to talk about is Islamophobia, or anti-Muslim hatred, as it is called. I'm currently writing a report, and the report is mainly on Islamophobia. And it's very important and it's very timely because, as we know, Islamophobia, this form of intolerance, is widespread and it's increasing. It's in the rise every single day in Europe, and it's steadily increasing. We see signs of Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred in every single country. There is no exception. And this kind of racism is based on a misconception, such as the idea that Islam is non-compatible with European values. We've had even politicians saying this. We've had people from all sectors of life having this kind of misconception, and that a process of Islamization of Europe, or the continent of Europe, is taking place. And that is especially the right wing. That is the rhetoric that they use as a narrative, that there is a process of Islamization taking place in Europe, and therefore we need to do something to stop it, because that religion with Islam is not compatible with European values. In a political landscape characterized by the rise of racist and xenophobic movements, such misconceptions are often the trigger and instrumentalize division within society and hate, and they sow the seeds of extreme hatred for political gain, mainly when we have especially political parties using that as a narrative. Furthermore, this kind of discourse tends to spread from extremist movements to mainstream political parties. Before, we were able to identify extreme movements and extreme right political parties, but today the rhetoric has been somehow adopted by mainstream parties. You can hardly make it, see a difference between the language and narrative and the rhetoric that is used by mainstream parties if you compare it to the right-wing extremist parties. And that is a problem, because it has been normalized as we speak every single day. So that's why, for me, as a rapporteur, as a general rapporteur, it is a reason for serious concern, countering intolerance and promoting peaceful living together, coexistence should be the top priority of all forces across the political spectrum, and especially the institution that I represent. The spread of Islamophobia does not necessarily also, it doesn't require or follow the emergence of Muslim community in a country or a region. We've seen that research has shown that widespread anti-Muslim hatred and sentiments can be observed in European countries with very limited presence of Muslims. In fact, this is often the result of misconceptions and stigmatization narratives that is spreading around the continent, and is affecting people and people's thoughts about Islam and Muslims. And this is a huge problem. And this is even more serious. Some of these people, they hate Muslims and Islam without even having an encounter with a Muslim ever, or knowing anything about Islam. And this is a cause of concern that we see within Europe. My report, I intend to make sure I have two objectives in my report. And the first one is to make sure that I raise awareness of the extent and the severity of the bias that Muslims face in most European countries, but also to make sure that we identify adequate measures, legal measures to address this issue. And that is extremely important for me. And some of the things that I want to focus on that I think is extremely important when it comes to Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred, is the gender aspect. I think the gender aspect is extremely important, and because Islamophobia is often described as a gendered form of racism, in that Muslim women are disproportionately affected by the racism that Muslims face. They face a challenging situation resulting from multiple and intersectional discrimination on grounds of gender, on grounds of religion, ethnic origin, migration background, and social status. Among other things, legislation banning religious symbols and dress in some Council of Europe member states severely affect women wearing the headscarf. And we've seen this happen in a number of member states of the Council of Europe. So I'm going to devote special attention to Muslim women in my report. And I think that is something that, of course, is going to raise a lot of attention, and it's going to be, it's going to be a lot of challenges, because people still in Europe do not believe that Islamophobia exists. I meet politicians at the highest level that somehow equate Islam or Muslims with terrorism. And you don't even have to be a Muslim to be a victim of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred. You just have to, they have to perceive you as a Muslim. Because as Muslims, this is one of the problems that we've seen, is that there is this racialization process where, if you're Arab, if you're somebody of Middle Eastern background, you're automatically seen as Muslim. And it doesn't matter if you're Christian, if you're Sikh, whatever, you're treated as a Muslim. And if me as a Black man who is a Muslim, I'm often, my religion is not the first thing that is identified when I talk to people. It's my skin color, it's the color of my skin, it's my race. That's what people would normally point out. And this is the problem. This is something that we see going on. And that's a special feature that we see when it comes to Islamophobia. Another thing that I also intend to raise is the specific feature of Islamophobia is the connection with the counterterrorism and anti-radicalization, jihadist terrorism, policies that we've seen. We've seen a lot of counterterrorism, anti-radicalization policies that have been brought up and introduced by member states. And we know that these policies normally would, in most cases, would disproportionately affect Muslims. We've seen this in the form of racial profiling, ethnic profiling increasing at a level that we've not seen before. And it triggers also stigmatization and prejudice targeting entire Muslim communities. And this is a reality that several research reports have shown is real. The latest one, I think, was done by Open Society Justice Foundation, where they showed that Muslims are targeted. And this is something that I myself and most of my friends go through when they travel around Europe. They're stopped in checkpoints, they're stopped at airports. Even within Sweden, where I live, we've seen that racial profiling is increasing. And it's often people that are perceived to be Muslim. They don't even necessarily have to be Muslim, but people perceived to be Muslims that are disproportionately affected by these policies and these laws. And this is something that I intend to work on and look at during in my report. We have this also misconception of Muslims as potentially separate and parallel community at best, and a threat to national security at worst. And this is something that we've seen. And even though you don't see any real evidence to this, but this is something that is a narrative that has been also been adopted by the highest level of policymakers. Because when we discuss about Islam and Muslims, it's always the root of the discussion is always based on the fact that Muslim or Islam is a problem, rather than looking at that, you have, when we talk about terrorism, you have one of the worst terrorists in Europe, the worst terrorists that have killed most people in modern European history. It's not a Muslim. It's Anders Behring Breivik from Norway. It's a white guy. But you don't see the kind of stigmatization on white people that you see the stigmatization on people with Middle Eastern background or Muslim background. And this is it only shows that there is this center. Europe is always seen as the center, and therefore as the Caucasian European cannot be evil or cannot do anything evil that would affect the rest of the Caucasian European community. But whenever a Black person does something, you can be rest assured this would stigmatize every Black person that lives on the European continent. Whenever a Muslim person does something wrong, instead of holding that individual accountable for their actions, we hold all Muslims accountable for what individual. In fact, we go to the extent of expecting all Muslims to condemn and say, I'm not like that. But when Anders Behring Breivik, bombed an entire government building and killed almost 70 people, young people, nobody demanded that all white people or all Christians must condemn this, and they must say, we do not have anything to do with this guy. So there is this, double moral, that there is this hypocritical way of seeing things. And that's something that I think I need to look at in writing my report. I also wanted to mention that one of the things that I want to take up is to cover adequately the situation of Muslim youth in Europe. And I think your organization will play a very important role in providing me with that kind of information that I need in order to be able to cover that part of the report, because I think the situation of Muslim youth, and when it comes to their experience of Islamophobia and the positive role they play also as individuals and as a group, as part of civil society organization, and addressing the discrimination that they face, I think would be also relevant for this report. Let me just finish by saying this. This report is an important report, and we know there are certain things going on today that we see, for example, in France, We've seen the situation in France. We've seen some of the legislation that are coming up in France. I have made a statement around this, expressing my concern as a general rapporteur when it comes to development that we're seeing in France and the legislation that they want to put in place and how it's going to impact Muslims, but especially in particular Muslim women. And this is something that is a dangerous way to go, because we don't want to set that precedent so that other member states will also copy what France is doing and think this is the norm. So therefore, we have an obligation. I have an obligation as a member of the Council of Europe to speak out and say, this is not the right way to go. We cannot stigmatize an entire community, an entire religion, based on what 1 or 2 or 10 individuals would do. Just like we would not do the same thing when, if it is the terrorist person, it's a white person, and we have evidence of this because we know the worst and the most dangerous terrorist in European history, modern European history today, it's not an Arab, it's not a black person, it's not a Muslim. But yet we do not have legislation that would impact white people, the entire white community, just because that guy happened to be white. But that guy has to be held accountable, just like every Muslim or somebody that is an Islamist that pretends to be Muslim and cause harm and destruction must be held accountable for their individual deeds. That is what the human rights is about. That is what the rule of law is about. And we cannot continue punishing entire communities. And that is something, an engagement that I want to have with you, an engagement that I'm going to do. I'm going to visit, I want to have a country visit to France, and I'll be meeting both government officials, but also policymakers, and both from both sides, opposition and government. I want to meet also civil society and experts to discuss this. And I want to meet FEMYSO and your member organizations and your members who can contribute, help me feed into this report, because I want to get a comprehensive report that would be balanced, but that also would somehow bring light to the situation of Muslims in the continent of Europe, but also so that we'll be able to have legislation that would address these challenges adequately and effectively. That is my intention, and I hope now that we know each other, and I followed your work because I used to be the vice chair of European Network Against Racism, and through that I followed the work that you've done. I know some of your members, and I hope we can continue having that dialogue so we can talk and discuss the possibility of helping me write a well-balanced and effective report as possible that will benefit us all, but also raise the concerns that we see, growing concerns that we see going on in Europe. So I'll stop there for now, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Malcolm, for those beautiful and encouraging words. Indeed, participation and standing and working together as one in Europe is key. But also thank you for your actions, and also personally as a visibly French Muslim woman. It's your work has not gone unnoticed and has been very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So next, we would like to invite Silja Markkula. Silja is currently the president of the European Youth Forum. She is devoted to advancing youth rights and has for the past few years put her time and energy into supporting European youth organizations in engaging with various human rights processes. Since she was 11 years old, she has been active in the Guides and Scouts movement and various Finnish youth organizations, and has a background in the Finnish National Youth Council, Alliansi. Silja, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here today to speak with you on this special time for Muslims across the world. My name is Silja Markkula, and I'm the president of the European Youth Forum. And for those of you who haven't heard of us yet, we are the largest platform of youth organizations in the world. We represent over 40 million young people from across Europe, and we advocate for youth rights. We try to make sure that the voice of the young generation is heard in Europe in decision making, and we try to do that mainly towards the EU, the UN, and the Council of Europe. Now, the past year and a half has been quite different for all of us, I believe. But young people in particular, we have been disproportionately hit by the pandemic. And while it hasn't necessarily been our health that has been impacted as much as for some, it really has brought dramatic changes to our circumstances. Many have lost their jobs, many have struggled with housing, access to education, hate speech, and so on. It's a lot of different ways that our generation has suffered in the past year and a half. It's been a year of sacrifices. Over the past 12 months, many young people have sacrificed their personal safety. As we know, during the pandemic, the young doctors, the shop floor workers, the delivery drivers, the fruit pickers, and many more, they all continued their work so that the rest of society could drastically change the way that they lived and worked. And young people have really been at the forefront at that. This Ramadan has always been also quite unique because of the context of the pandemic. And while it has been incredibly difficult time for everyone, I think there's reason to hope. And I personally can see the seeds of change grow, and all of us, we do play an important role when it comes to driving towards more change. And we've heard the speakers before me also address how they are bringing that, and I know that FEMYSO is part of that change as well, and I'm very happy to see that. Now, despite the hardships that our generation has faced during the past year and a half, I would like to talk about the positive, and not in the COVID-19 positive way, but in the traditional sense of the word, if we still remember that. What we have witnessed during the pandemic is resilience and courage of youth to keep actively engaging in society, no matter what you throw at them. Of course, it's been difficult for various reasons, but we have seen youth organizations still try and do that. Not just at the forefront of the virus, fighting against it, but also beyond that, in our communities, in our societies, trying to drive towards more inclusive societies as we know it. And that's the beauty of what we do in youth organizations. We look around, we see a problem, and then we try to find a way to solve it. Now, something that we have been working on to solve as the European Youth Forum is to make sure that youth aren't just left to solve our problems alone and on our own, but that we are actively brought into the discussions that concern our lives, into the decision-making tables, so that we can be part of the conversation. And we've been trying to make sure that our rights as young people are recognized, that we are perceived as rights holders by the institutions that have a duty to defend our rights, according to the international conventions, the covenants, the human rights treaties that different governments across the world have signed and committed to. And this is what we call the rights-based approach, where we, as youth organizations, we support young people, regardless of their background, to call for their rights to be ensured. And we hold governments, the duty bearers, we hold them accountable in holding their end of the bargain. And sometimes it means calling them out. Sometimes on a brighter day, it means that we support them, that we support the institutions and decision makers in doing their job when it comes, in doing their job better when it comes to ensuring and defending the rights of young people. No one should feel threatened or face violence or hate speech because of who they are. And governments, they have a responsibility to ensure that this doesn't happen. And this, again, is where youth organizations play a crucial role in bringing that change. We, as youth organizations, we are the experts in what it means to be a young person in today's world, just like FEMYSO is the expert in what it means to be Muslim and a young Muslim person in Europe today. And this is why it matters that we bring our voices to the table. We are the experts in what it means to be us. and decision makers, they have a duty to listen to our voices and a duty to ensure that our human rights are realized. This is what creates a change in our societies, that we actively do our end of that role, that we bring our voices to the table. But we also need to remember that governments, they also have a duty to ensure our human rights. Now, as the European Youth Forum, we cannot wait for FEMYSO to become part of the Youth Forum. As a member organization, we would very much like to strengthen our relationship beyond just partnerships and projects. Muslim youth need to be part of all the conversations that the Youth Forum is having with policymakers. So with you on board, we would ensure that as a platform, we would be even more representative, and that the policy changes that we advocate for as a platform would truly reflect even more of the voices of young Europeans. More inclusive youth organizations eventually lead to more inclusive societies as well through this way. And this is the vision that we stand for and stand together with FEMYSO as youth organizations, and hope that we can together work towards achieving that. Now, thank you very much for having me today. I hope this is a continuous conversation that we can have, and I wish you a very joyful reception here as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Silja, for your kind and true words, and for the great work as well that the European Youth Forum does. Thanks a lot for joining us today. I would now like to call our next guest, which is Rui Gomez. So Rui is the head of division education and training in the youth department of the Council of Europe, and we are blessed to have an excellent relationship with the youth department, who have been leaders in trying to ensure that the diversity youth is effectively represented. Rui, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hiba. I hope you can hear me and hopefully also see me. Thanks very much. So, hello, everyone. I have a very brief message. I mean, after this very nice introduction of a very bureaucratic name and function that I have, I just would like to share with you how I spent most of the holy months of Ramadan. I spent most of it actually reviewing and editing a manual on anti-racism, a manual that was created originally for the first European youth campaign, All Different, All Equal, a campaign against racism, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and intolerance, which the Council of Europe launched in 1995. Now, this has been an exciting and painful task, I can assure you. Exciting because European young people and European youth needs to be supported to stand up against racism and discrimination in all their forms. And also because we received many calls for action following the reactions to the assassination of George Floyd last year, and many people turn to us and say, what are you doing? But it has also been very painful, because I realized that in many ways, the fundamental premise of equality in diversity, which is represented by this slogan, all different, all equal, remains a faraway dream for many of us, and especially for many young people. Racism and other ideologies of domination, oppression, or supremacy have not disappeared. In fact, I realize it's almost as if they are now even more widespread, more visible, and sometimes even almost more normalized. The No Hate Speech Movement campaign, a campaign of the Council, another campaign of the Council of Europe, which FEMYSO very much contributed to, showed also that the internet and the online world have amplified the phenomena of hate speech, which is nothing else than the vocalization of racist and discriminatory ideas. And what we witness as the proliferation of populist discourses across Europe and beyond tend to emphasize polarized views of society and a world which divides people and communities into the good ones and the not so good ones, into us and into them. And these phobias and insecurities resulting from terrorism, from the COVID-19 pandemic, or from the anxiety about climate crisis or environmental crisis, only exacerbate this even further. And this is how slowly we notice that red lines are crossed the exception becomes the norm or becomes normal, and human rights considerations are sidelined. But I am also confident that young people interact and take action in new ways and mobilize themselves about new issues. And they're also globally connected through virtual and real networks of youth organizations, of friends, and of activists. Acts of racist violence and hate speech are also better known today and cannot be ignored. Open and subtle forms of oppression are better understood and I believe also recognized. And young people play an important role in denouncing, questioning, and challenging social and political norms that justify or nurture themselves on exclusion and violence against racialized groups of society or simply vulnerable people. We know that racism produces certain people as populations and produces these populations as problems. We can see it at work in the question, very common in some political circles, when the lives of certain people are subject to endless public debates. What do we do about them? And we can also see it at work in its very denial, in the insistence that socio-economical inequalities, labor market marginalization, exposure to police violence, and political scapegoating have nothing to do with race. We are told, well, it's their culture, it's their values, or it's their religion. It's their upbringing. It's not racism. And in this way, racism thoughts, racism thinking, places limits on and inserts forms of violence into the lives of many people in contemporary Europe. But I also have hope that the movement for universal dignity and human rights has become and is becoming more universal. It is also more respectful of diversity, pluralism, and the relation between causes and struggles for equality and humanity. It hopefully values better the current but also the historical experiences of domination and oppression, which affect the lives of many young people. But I believe also that this universality needs to be expanded. We cannot stay among ourselves. We need to expand it and make sure that it reaches out. And we need to recognize the pluriversal forms that equality and dignity takes and recognize them, all of them, everywhere. Part of our response in youth work and in youth organizations has always to be educational. The popularity of populist nationalistic and xenophobic ideas is also the result of failures in education for human rights, including anti-racism education. I think that sometimes we take it for granted that everybody will do their job, and sometimes we realize with pain, no, it's not done. So we need to take more action against inequality, injustice, and discrimination everywhere, and we need to go beyond the victims and the perpetrators. We all contribute, and we know this. I think that we have to be very honest with this. We all contribute to continuing, changing, or transforming the system, especially if we speak about systematic forms of racism and discrimination. Youth organizations and youth activists have a long history of opposing these limits and forms of violence, and also of working to change the conditions, relations, and attitudes that sustain them. Sustaining this opposition and working for better futures requires constantly renewing our understanding of how racism works in our society, how it manifests itself in economy, social relations, political processes, how it intersects with other forms of discrimination, how it varies from context to context, how it is dominantly understood and consequently frequently denied in European society. The youth sector of the Council of Europe has constantly and regularly stood up for equality, diversity, and social cohesion. Today, this remains one of our priority missions, and I'm very happy to work for an organization that engaged with FEMYSO as a partner way back in 2002. And this has resulted in FEMYSO being a member of the Advisory Council on Youth, which is still the case today with Anne de Tanner. by working together, and I think this together is very important, by working together to solve common challenges as young people and as young Europeans, we can overcome the prejudice and break chains of oppression or indifference that bound us and limit us. Now, I'd like to finish by quoting one of the contributors to this manual I was talking about. Her name is Domenica Bidu, sorry. She's Vice President of the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance for the Netherlands. And she says in her closing remarks, to use a term deprived of emotion, I'm quoting, there needs to be more social cohesion in European society. Now, to use an emotionally charged and simple term, all young people, regardless of where their parents or grandparents were born, need to feel loved by the societies that surround them. And I was very touched by this. So I go for the emotionally charged version. All young people need to feel loved by the societies that surround them. And I wish you all success in reaching out to young people with friendship, with love, and with solidarity. And also with the confidence that the power of human rights is stronger than the power of its violators or of their violators. So Eid Mubarak to all of you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rui, for your kind wishes and this beautiful speech as well, and for this ongoing constant collaboration for a better Europe for all. Thank you so much, Rui Gomez. Next, I am happy to call on Zamzam Ibrahim. Zamzam Ibrahim is currently the Vice President of the European Student Union, a student politician who was previously the President of the UK National Union of Students, NUS, in 2019. She formerly served as the NUS Vice President and President of her University Students' Union. Zamzam, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. I'm currently in a car because of traffic, you know what it's like. But I wanted to make sure that I participate and say Eid Mubarak to everybody. So first of all, Eid Mubarak, and I apologize for the noise and the rain outside. But this is the greeting that we get back. But Eid Mubarak, and thank you so much, Hiba, for the lovely and beautiful introduction. It's always a pleasure to join FEMYSO events, especially when there are celebrations. So alhamdulillah, it's great to be here. So for those of you, as Hiba just mentioned, I'm the Vice President of the European Students' Union. And for those of you unacquainted with the European Students' Union, ESU is the umbrella organization of 45 national unions from 40 different countries. And this aim is to represent and promote educational and social justice and economical, cultural interests of students all across Europe on a European level and towards all the relevant bodies. And ESU has existed just over, just about 40 years now. We're about to hit our 40-year anniversary. And I would like to also begin by thanking my friends at FEMYSO for this very opportunity to addressing this important gathering and celebrating our Islamic holiday Eid, which comes to us, of course, after the incredible holy month of Ramadan. And today, the topic I want to talk about is gender Islamophobia and what must be done to tackle this deeply damaging phenomena. As an activist, I think Ramadan and Eid can be used as the perfect analogy when we refer to our joint journey in tackling inequality. As young people of color, we quite literally exist in a society not built for us. We're fastly, fully expressing our identities in order to survive, but we strive and make the effort to create a better society where all of are accepted regardless of the color of their skin, of their faith, and for that to be our collective Eid. And the biggest victims when it comes to the manifestation of Islamophobia is undoubtedly Muslim women like me, and it's often due to the visible nature of our practice. The manners that gender Islamophobia can manifest itself ranges from structural, where institutions actively implement policies which directly impact upon our experiences, like the one of the recent bans, the religious symbols within educational institutions, which have been implemented historically in France, but recently across European countries, Germany, Belgium, And that's concerning and worrying. To seriously tackle Islamophobia, it is indispensable to recognize its existence and its dangerous consequences. The reality is that Islamophobia is still not being recorded as a separate category of crime in any EU country. And this threatens the effectiveness of building a strategy that could counter this growing anti-Muslim hatred that we find in our regions. And the reality is European institutions and national governments must start taking stronger measures to combat the growing Islamophobia that's being put under our European values at risk. Stigmatizing Muslims in the media, public and political discourse through legislative acts and educational institutions is an active part of Islamophobia. While religious minorities should be able to live in peace in Europe, Muslim communities are being targeted on a daily basis. And so the challenges ahead are numerous, and we're very much aware of that. But as an anti-European and this anti-institutional age that we're living in, and is constantly being celebrated, we must choose to believe in support and support our civil societies and our institutions and the capacity to protect the vulnerable and guarantee equal rights for everyone to be able to coexist together. So it's always a pleasure to be here, and I want to apologize again for being in a car and all this traffic. But again, Eid Mubarak from myself to all of the FEMYSO family and everybody that's listening in. And it's such a pleasure to have been invited again. So thank you, Hiba.
Thank you very much, Zamzam, for joining us despite your circumstances and for raising those very, very crucial and important points. One of the next speaker that I will be calling on, inshallah, is Abdel Bettahar. Abdel is the chair of Muslim Youth Forum in Finland, one of FEMYSO's 30th plus member organizations. And we are very proud of the work that they all do to create a more diverse, cohesive, and vibrant Europe for all. Abdel, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to this platform. So, the story of Muslim Youth Forum of Finland is an essential part of the Finnish experience with youth engagement. Our story started more than 20 years ago when the previous generation of NMF came together with ideas. They saw a need that needed to be filled, but no one was working on it. And this is how NMF started. It basically started with young people not accepting and getting comfortable with the reality they were living in and consciously deciding to do something about it. And personally, this is what I expect from each young person across the globe. My speech will be divided into two parts. I will talk about why it is the responsibility of the youth to take a key role in society, and that will be directed to my young friends who are inspired to influence society or are getting into this world. The second part of my speech is dedicated to the decision makers who has the power to influence directly the decision-making process. And I will be talking about why it is necessary and a right of young people to have a key role in society. I always start with talking about responsibility before speaking about it as a right, because that is the best way to cooperate, not just in society, but life altogether. If each of us fulfills our responsibilities, all rights would be fulfilled. Simple as that. My fellow young people, embracing a key role in society starts with us. We ourselves must first understand the importance of young people's perspective and fully comprehend the value that we bring to society. Now I want you to close your eyes, and I mean it, close your eyes and imagine the world as it is right now. The scientific discoveries that we have in our world. Imagine culture as it is right now in this day and age. Imagine art and the rest of our environment, and so forth. Now let's imagine the same thing over again, but let's take the input of young people out of it. Imagine culture without the input of the youth. What about art? How would art look like without the input of youth? What about the input of young people in the fight against climate change? What about all of the protests that are driven and led by young people? As you can see, there is much that young people can do. My message to young people is first and foremost to acknowledge the value that we bring to society, then taking practical steps to take action. This is how we ensure a sustainable future for ourselves and the coming generations. And now let's move to the second part of the speech. We will talk about why it is necessary and a right of young people to have a key role in society. I would like to ask a question. To whom does the future belong to? The answer is everybody. The future belongs to the seniors whose input in society cannot be disregarded, and their interest must be served. The future belongs to the adults and the youth that are currently contributing to society and wish to live peacefully in a harmonious society. The future also belongs to the children that need us to be responsible and serving also their interests. The political field is complex, and there is no denying that serving all of the mentioned interest groups is not easy. This is why us, young people, we have a proposal. We are willing to have a key role in society. We're not talking about you coming and getting ideas from us, even though that is a good thing. But this is why I keep using the word key part of the society. We are willing and we are capable to be part of the political, social, and financial decision-making process. We want to be at the center of anything that affects us. Our main interest is to sustain the long prosperity of the world. This is why we keep fighting climate change, because we want to enjoy this world today and tomorrow and the day after that. This is why we fight Islamophobia, because we have seen, based on historical experience, these signs before. How signs of dehumanizing, systemic racism, and denying basic human rights, such as freedom of speech and freedom of religion, can become, if not dealt with immediately. My respected decision makers, we as young people have now reached out, and we need you to cooperate with us so that we can deal with the challenges facing us all together and also find new innovative ways of sustaining this world. I end my speech by mentioning again the responsibility of young people to engage in society before speaking about it as a right. My fellow young people, get together, brainstorm, share ideas, and connect with different interest groups. And finally, take actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdelmajid Bettahar, for your brilliant contribution. As yourselves and the other speakers said, being active and participation are a crucial action as well as a responsibility, both for young people, but also for institutions to allow it to happen. And as active citizenship is also one of FEMYSO's core pillars in training and Western European youth. So the very last but not least speaker that I have the pleasure to call upon is Abdurrahman Rizq, who is our current president of FEMYSO, and who will be sharing with us his message along with some closing remarks. Thank you very much. Abdurrahman, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hiba, for the smooth hosting of the reception so far. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. peace and blessings be upon you all. On behalf of FEMYSO, the Forum of European Muslim Youth and Student Organizations, I wish Muslims in Europe and across the world Eid Mubarak. Some managed to celebrate with their loved ones, but many couldn't due to the coronavirus pandemic. Our hearts and thoughts are with you all. I hope that the month of Ramadan was a time where young people managed to invest their time in developing the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, grow their good habits, and learn new things, as well as contributing the sadaqah and zakah towards worthy causes. Once again, we saw the tireless efforts of young Muslims across Europe to be at the forefront of supported societies, including during the month of Ramadan. For example, in France, our member organizations, EMF, distributed over 25,000 meals to students who needed the most. And all the way to North Macedonia, our member organization, FRI, distributed hundreds of food packages to the families in need, especially during this tough time of the coronavirus pandemic. This year, 2021, marks a very special milestone to FEMYSO, in which we are celebrating our 25th anniversary. 25 years of uninterrupted service to young European Muslims and the wider European community. 25 years of bringing young people from across Europe together for a common goal, which is contributing to build a more diverse, cohesive, and vibrant Europe. 25 years of developing and empowering young people through our unparalleled capacity building initiatives. 25 years of advocating for the rights of Muslims and human rights in general. 25 years of working closely with partners from all backgrounds. 25 years of cooperation with key European and international institutions. Reflecting the history of FEMYSO, I must acknowledge the effort and passion of our young volunteers, members of the Executive Committee and Board of Trustees, as well as staff members who served the organization throughout the past 25 years. Without them, without their efforts, we could not have been where we are right now. So, to all our member organizations, partner organizations, and friends, we thank you for your trust and dedication towards FEMYSO. I end by thanking our friends and guests who joined us today at this reception for the heartwarming words and insightful interventions. It was truly and real pleasure to hosting you all. So thank you once again. Before I finish, make sure that you follow our website, social media platforms to keep up with our very exciting news and exciting events. Eid Mubarak and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.